Welcome back to A Shark's Perspective. So, if you've ever managed any type of campaign, then there's a pretty good chance that you've used some sort of automation to drip your messaging. But are you really looking at the strategy behind it? Or to the consumer, are you simply sending out a lot of constant brand messaging through a channel, leveraging a powerful technology tool that may push the customer away instead of pulling them in closer? So many have set it and forget it, if you will, as evidenced too often with many campaigns. And with powerful technology out there today to deliver so many automated messages, are you attributing the success or lack thereof correctly? And where everyone in your organization buys into that last click, if you will, agreeing on what worked best with so many touch points. Carly Schrager is the CEO of Definitive Results, and on this episode we'll discuss automation, technology and stacks, attribution, C-suite buy-in, email and drip campaigns, build or buy, data quality, omni-channel, monuments and politics in DC, and a lot more. So let's tune in to a marketing automation expert with a shark who cannot be automated on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Carly, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. If you would, tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, your career to date.
Sure. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
So I've always been in that space of marketing technology. And I was previously always sort of the liaison between marketing and IT, the only one who could sort of speak IT language, but then translate it back to the marketers. So that kind of carried me through
It's good to be a tweener.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The beginning of my career was a lot of saying, hey, can't we do this more efficiently and use the computer more instead of sending direct mail pieces all the time? And fortunately, the industry started to catch up. So I spent some time just doing what they called back then database marketing. And then I went to work at AOL for a while doing marketing analysis. So really diving into the metrics and reporting and understanding what works and doesn't work in that audience. Then I went back and I was actually tasked with identifying a new email sending platform. And when I went out to research that in 2008, I stumbled across marketing automation and that just blew my mind. And I came back to my boss and said, this is it. We've got to adopt this platform. And she said, you just came back with the Rolls Royce of systems. I just wanted to send some emails. Yeah. I said, no way. This is the future. We cannot adopt some other system that we're going to have to change again in 2 years to catch up with everybody else. So we ended up bringing marketing automation in. I led that process for our company and 4 sister companies. And I just fell in love with it. Led that team for the next 3.5 years. And then in early 2012, stepped out and started Definitive Results. And I was just so excited to see more companies and more puzzles to solve with marketing automation. And then just built the team at Definitive Results. We expanded from an Eloqua partner to a Marketo partner to a HubSpot partner as the industry has grown, just adopting the new technology. And then more recently transitioning from, in addition to supporting the marketing automation system, looking at, attribution reporting and reviewing MarTech stacks that have just kind of organically grown at companies. So we just kind of continue to expand as our clients grow and as the industry matures.
So how do you see marketing automation today as far as being a solution and a problem for brands everywhere?
Yeah, I mean, it's grown so much over the years. I think we've always sort of sat there and said, it needs to do more. It needs to do more. We kind of see where this is going and why isn't the technology already there? So there are marketers that say, why isn't the technology doing what I know we need to do? And then there are marketers that are saying, how do I get this technology into my organization and actually get people to adopt it and figure out how to use it? So it's kind of a matter of exploring all of those problems, right? But always turning it into wherever a company is in their marketing maturity life cycle, meeting them there and just getting them to the next step. There's always a positive, right, to get them over that hump.
So how should we look at automation? I mean, how does the modern marketer take automation and do it better than they're doing it now, or implement it? I mean, most people to some degree have implemented it. Even if it's the worst CRM system on the planet, they've started some sort of automation. But with drip campaigns being something that was a novelty a decade ago and now is just a pure necessity, the way people are looking at automation today, what burns me a lot is so much of it is just sort of set it and forget it. And I feel like so often people have taken what they could without stopping to think whether or not they should,
Yes.
and not putting a lot of strategy and process behind it, but they're delivering just a boatload of emails, for example, and they're just sending a massive amount of emails daily,
Yeah.
through the entire cycle.
Yeah. So we always preach this three-step process of strategize, implement, optimize for that exact reason. You have to start with what are our goals setting out, and whether you're just bringing in marketing automation for the first time, we need you to step back and say, why are you bringing in marketing automation? What are you trying to accomplish with this, right? That also determines what tools are going to be the best match for you. Not everybody's ready for an enterprise platform. And so I think it's so important for marketers to be real about where they are and know that unless you've got a ton of budget and a ton of resources and the ability of time to focus on it, you're not going from 0 to 60 overnight, right? So that's where it depends where you are. Like you were saying, if somebody's doing drip campaigns and essentially batch and blast emails still, we've got to start there and show them the baby steps, right? So okay, instead of drip campaigns, why don't we look at a little bit more segmentation and targeting? Why don't we look at a little bit more of the activity? And why don't we morph that into meeting them where they are based on what they're telling us they're interested in and what they're looking at? And so, right, that's a baby step as opposed to saying, if a company is ready and they're willing to devote the time and effort to it, okay, let's have a whole full-blown nurture strategy session. Let's really map out what this is going to look like. And even if we map out, hey, this is what you need to be doing in 2 years, 3 years, and then we take the baby steps to get there, to actually get the build in, then that's a fine way to go. But I'm just never okay with the answer of, we don't have time, or this is just where we are and we can't get past this stage. Anybody can get past the stage. You just have to take it one little step at a time. And some of it's just understanding, like, what are the steps to get from 0 to 60, even if it's going to take you 2 years to do it.
Well, this is a ridiculous analogy, but I've used it before, so maybe if nobody's heard it before, then they won't laugh too much, or they'll have already known how silly this is. But I sort of sometimes compare a lot of it to dating. There was a company that I work with that I fired as a service. Fired them as a service. I'd been a customer of theirs for several years, and then they kept me on their email campaigns. And I've gotten it's been almost a year now. I've gotten well over 400 emails sent from them. It's more than one a day. It's almost two a day. There have been days where there were as few as one, a couple that were zero, but most of the time it's 1 to 3. And it's the same junk offers that are just over and over and over. And if I went to talk to that CMO tomorrow and said, this is what the kind of stuff that you're spewing out, not in this, again, this is one example with an email campaign. It could apply to a lot of different types of automation. But you talk to a lot of CMOs today, and I'm curious, do you find that they know that they have a problem and they're coming to you to help fix a specific problem in regards to automation? Or are you pointing out to them that much more often, here's where somebody's getting 1,000 junky emails that don't mean anything?
We definitely have both. So,
Okay.
I'll have meetings or somebody will just sort of open up. We hear a lot, it's a joke that, like, oh, we're in a therapy session, particularly if we do an audit of a platform. It kind of is a therapy session. They have to just sort of open up and air their dirty laundry and what keeps them up at night so that we know what to dig into.
Tell you how they feel about their mother.
Right.
Yeah.
Must be where this list problem comes from. So no, we have CMOs that definitely say, like, we are not doing this right. We are batch and blast. We are not personalizing. We don't have the right data to personalize, right?
And do you see that with large, sophisticated companies too that are admitting this?
It definitely, yes,
Yeah.
it definitely happens. And I mean, I just say, well, look, you're taking the first step, right? You said it out loud, you're asking for help, and you can get help. This is not something that can't be solved, right? You just have to stop and address it.
First problem in automation is admitting you have a problem. It's that or alcoholism. It's one of them. It's
right, or both. Just
both,
say
yeah.
it out loud,
Yeah.
and now we can all acknowledge
Yeah.
it and move on.
Well,
Absolutely.
I do find that a lot of larger, more sophisticated companies don't. I think too often we box in the smaller guys and girls, being that they're the ones we think have a problem, and if they just implemented Salesforce, for example, that's going to fix everything, and that does not. That just
Yeah.
makes spammed automation that much more easily to implement, which is part of the problem. But I've seen this in as many large companies that develop these really complex systems, and it gets so complex it gets out of control. They don't know what they're implementing.
Yeah, it's big companies. It is harder and it takes longer to solve the problem. And part of it is that big companies a little bit get in their own way, right?
Yeah.
Because there are internal politics. At a smaller company, a lot of times you have a system owner, and as long as they sort of run something by two or three people higher up and get approval, they can go make the changes and they can kind of disperse the new process to the rest of the team. But in the big companies, there are so many cooks in the kitchen that it's hard to get everybody in
And a
agreement.
lot of smart cooks too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, it's not that there's not the intelligence or the know-how. It's just sort of the ability to mobilize and make change and how far spread that has to go. Because generally, if you're making a system change, a lot of times it requires a people change too in terms of processes. And it's hard to get that many sales reps to use Salesforce differently, or that many marketers to reconsider their lead sources or the tracking of those lead sources, right? It is harder for them to kind of mobilize and make changes.
So we've got them to where they admitted they have a problem. Then where do you jump in and start?
So a lot of times, I mean, we like to start with an audit just to make sure that we understand actually what's going on. So you hear a lot of people talking. It's almost like when you ask the sales team, what's the best lead you can get? And then you get 20 different answers about what that is if you have 20 reps in the room. But then when you look at the data, you're actually looking at sort of the hard evidence of what is true versus not necessarily true in reality. And so it's similar when you talk to marketers or even CMOs all the way down to those in the system. What's the problem? Why can't you do better targeting? Why can't we get better response rates? And when you look in the system, you often see like an additional story to that. So looking at what's actually going on, we're actually able to say, okay, you told us that the way that you identify your audience segments is using these 5 fields, for example. One of them's 80% blank. How's that working? Oh, that's why so many aren't showing up when we, filter them on that. So we kind of get the rest of the story there. And then it's a matter, and I say this so often, I think I've already said it on here, is establishing the roadmap, right? It's in order for you to accomplish what you want to accomplish, here are the 20 steps you need to take. You can take them all in 3 weeks if you want, or you can take them all across a year. I don't care, that's up to you, but these are the steps that you need to take in order to solve the problem that you're looking to solve. And as you pointed out before, it's not just about getting to sort of that finish line that we map, it's that last step of optimize. So whether you're setting up a nurture strategy or you're looking at a new lead scoring methodology or a personalization effort, once you sort of set it up and get to that quote finish line, now you're not at the finish line. Now it really begins. Now is when you get to make a difference. It's set up properly. Now you get to look at what's actually resonating, look at the metrics, and then start tweaking it to continue to optimize. And that lives on forever. So while automation, absolutely, it creates efficiencies. You can do more with less people. What it does is you automated these 3 processes. Now you always go back and check on how they're performing and continue to optimize, but now you can focus your time building in areas that you weren't able to focus before. And then they get shifted into the optimized category. And it just keeps going that way, which ultimately significantly improves your marketing effectiveness.
So if I'm going through and I'm doing an audit in my systems today, whatever brand I work for, work with, where should I start? Where do you think people should start?
There's a lot of areas.
Well, I mean, it's tech stacks, it's data, it's
Yes.
so much. But where do you recommend that most people start if they're not calling you tomorrow to set up a consulting engagement?
Yeah.
This is good advice for anybody to start looking in the mirror with, especially now, because look, if you look at pretty much any website and you give them your email address, and again, email's one piece of this. I don't want to get too locked into just only being email nurture campaigns, but email in particular, you give anybody, then they have turned on the machine, and you will, fold in submission into the fetal position before they will remove you or from 20 unsubscribe attempts. But
Yes.
I also find that so much of it, other than just that part of the bad strategy, is, and I'm curious to see where you think people should start. the data behind this that people have, it's the difference between me sending you an email that says, "Hi, Carly," versus "Hi, whoever your colleague or husband or wife or brother or sister or whoever it is." There's so much bad data out there, multiple data sets. And so if somebody's listening today right now and they want to start looking themselves in the mirror with their automation, where do you think they should start?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in line with you. I think it's about I always think of it as sort of the foundation, right? And the foundation of your marketing and the foundation of any of your technology is your data, as well as kind of the configuration. So if you have integration issues, for example, between marketing automation and CRM, that can be detrimental, right? Sales might not be getting the leads or getting all the lead data that they need to make that initial call, a home run. But data in particular, as you said, any enhancement data, if you're doing personalization and segmentation, you need as much data as you can get, and you can't get it wrong, right? So if you're not updating, there are instances where fields aren't updating properly, so now you have this kind of combination record of old data and new data, and that's horrendous. If you have my old job title at my existing company, it's almost offensive to me, right? And you're not targeting me properly. So yeah, if you're going to tackle kind of where do I start, where's the first step, look into your data, start looking at your fields, look at field population on your most important fields, look at standardization on fields that you're using for segmentation and personalization.
So 100 years ago, when I started in MarTech, this was somewhat easier as technology started to grow, and you would go in, through a consulting engagement that had, for the most part, always been sold, and you'd go in there and you go in and you fix things. Now, I'm really curious as well, when we were talking about this earlier, how you get from "I'd like to audit your systems" to "here's a problem that we can fix," and then get that implemented, the changes that they need to make.
I mean, we have a little bit of a leg up in that generally, if we've gotten to that point where they're letting us look in their system, they want to fix the problem, right? So
Okay.
it's a big enough pain point that
Yeah.
they don't want it to exist anymore. So unless we're coming back with,
So you're saying, though, that most people realize they have a pain point.
well, and if they don't, they're not talking to us.
Exactly. That's a good
Right?
point. Good point.
Yeah, and I'll run into people just in conversations, as you mentioned. We go to 100 conferences, right? And I talk to all these people, and they will say, I'll hear people say, "Yeah, we implemented X system, and it really wasn't anything special," And I'll say, "Oh my gosh, tell me more. Why? Why?" Well, I mean, we didn't see any improvement in response rates. I needed somebody to manage the system, on and on. And like, yeah, it's actually not the system that's the issue. You can't, it's like you said, you can't just bring in a system and then
Yeah.
sort of peace
Set it and
out.
forget it. Yeah.
Right. And so, and we're seeing that a lot, actually. I was thought of this earlier.
Well, the technology is easier to implement today than it was a decade ago. So it's very
Yes.
easy to buy this stuff, implement it, and then close your eyes a little bit.
Yeah, and that's not how it works. Computers make things move faster. They're not smarter, and so I always have to repeat that too when it comes to technology. Now, with AI coming into the mix, you could make an argument that it is smarter. I don't think we're really there yet where you can make that argument, but it's like now we'll have a lot of conversations where companies want to migrate from one platform to another. And so I always sit down with them and say, "Oh, okay, how come you want to migrate? What's going on there? This one's not working for us." And I say, "Okay, great. What are the problems you're running into?" And they list the problems. It's like 90% of the time, switching platforms is not going to solve your problems.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a people process problem, the technology doesn't
Great
matter.
point. Yeah.
And you have to be properly trained, and you have to be educated on how these things work. You got to know how to make it ride. Somebody had compared it to cars, and I'm not a car person, so I might not do it justice, but it's kind of like, do you want to go get the race car and then drive it to the grocery store? You have to understand the power of what you just bought and how to make it actually work according to what it's capable of.
Yeah, no, that's such a great point. I can't tell you how many CRM conversations I've had where somebody just wanted to change CRMs and think that was going to fix everything. So one of the other issues I know we've talked about was one of the biggest problems I find is how we look at attribution today. Everybody in the year 2020, your attribution modeling is completely blown because of the pandemic. People were consuming media in a much different way. I think everybody's models that were suspect at best in 2019 and before, now in 2021, they're going to be messed up. What do you see as the problem with attribution reporting today in your world?
Oh gosh. This is one of those topics I just have to say for all the marketers out there that I think how much we all talk about it makes a lot of companies feel like everybody else is doing it except for them.
Really?
Um, and the reality
Well, they
is
are. They're just doing it wrong.
there's that, but it's also really, it is the more mature marketing teams that are doing it. It's not all companies. I mean, if you really get them to sort of step out of the circle and admit they're not even tackling it at this point. So we do have a lot of companies that are right because they're the ones that are sort of investing more in their marketing adventure. And one of the biggest struggles is, well, just technologically setting it up. You're working across multiple platforms, but I'd say the biggest initial struggle is establishing and globally within their company agreeing upon the logic that goes into attribution reporting. And if you don't have that done well, if you don't agree on the logic and get buy-in from all of the relevant internal stakeholders, you're wasting your time doing everything else. Because I mean, I lived through it back in 2010, I think it was. I was working for another company and I led the attribution reporting effort. And we didn't have the buy-in from the VP of sales. We had the buy-in from sales reps and team leads, but not the VP of sales. And we were banging our heads against the wall for months, producing reports, modifying logic, modifying reports. And every time they would come back and say, nope, nope, I don't agree. This opportunity doesn't fall into the logic. And so therefore the CEO wasn't on board because there was an agreement between marketing and sales.
Give us
And
an example. Give us an example. Dive into one.
yeah, so it was okay, high level, here are the opportunities and what marketing efforts they tie back to, or if they're straight sales. Okay, well, they'd sit at the table, sales would say, well, what's in here? I can't make any sense of this. What are the opportunities? Speak to me in accounts. Show me what's in here. Okay, so we come back with all the detail. Well, that opportunity, no. So and so had a relationship with them before, and that's why we got that. They may have attended that webinar and they may have visited these pages on the website and filled out the form, but we got the opportunity because so and so had a relationship with them. That is true.
They're
right?
arguing first click versus last.
Yes. And so then it's right. Then it's, and do you count the things in the middle and how much weight do you give to them? And there is no one answer for every company. What's most important is that everybody who has a stake in this internally agrees on the logic that you're using. And at that point, which is what I had to back it up to, I had to say, forget all of this. Let's talk about the logic, right? And if we can all agree to that, then it's no longer nitpicking the little things. We all agree that everybody has an influence in this. And if there weren't sales, nothing would close. Got it. That's not what marketing is trying to show with these reports either.
Well, especially in advertising, and I find this to be a conversation I've had way too many times in my life, is I think Google, for example, gave the world the greatest attribution reporting on the planet because it was the best one that benefited them, and it tells the most wonderful story about how their website works with your website. And it does a great job of that, but everybody knows there's so many other channels, and so people have gotten so lost, and so all they've done is dial up a lot of the automation with a lot of the other things, and it just becomes scatter spray and not understanding, not being a little more agnostic about the channels, which is something that I preach about over and over again. But this is a problem that dates back to somebody I reference all the time, John Wanamaker, the famed American pioneer that said half the money I spent on advertising is wasted. The problem is I don't know which half, but he said it over 100 years ago. So it is a problem that still exists today. And as sophisticated as people can get with certain channels, they're still getting completely lost on others. And it is a massive problem. And so the more that people fight for this money with channels as they change and expand, especially because of where we are during a pandemic, it becomes even more important understanding the weight of all those channels and how they work together. So Google didn't do anything wrong. They just did a better job than other people providing bad data. And so it can be a real problem for trying to understand how to best service your customer with technology.
Yeah. It absolutely is. And it comes back to how much data we have access to, and still just trying to sort through it all and make sense of it all. And because you can slice and dice it in so many different ways and use different logic and tell really different stories. I mean, I learned that back in the day when I was in marketing analysis. You can kind of tell the story you want, just pick the data that supports it.
How should someone go about that conversation with tackling who it is within their C suite needs to understand? Because it is a much different conversation when you're trying to sell. If you're a manager, director, VP, SVP, whatever, it's a much different conversation you're going to have with your CMO versus a CGO versus a CFO versus the CEO.
Right. Yeah, I like to think of it, if you fast forward, pretend you have all the reports and all the data, everything set up just the way you would want it to be. Now you have reports in your hands. Who are you going to go meet with? Who are you going to share this information with? Because it feels like there's something actionable in it for them, or you need their buy-in on a decision. And so it often is finance, it is the CEO, it is sales, right? Sales and marketing should be really looking at these together all the time. And in other companies, it could have other important stakeholders. And once you identify who those people are that will find this information relevant later, that's, you bring them together and you start having not the very first conversations, but early on in the process, you need to talk to them about what are the options for attribution and what does that look like down the line when they're looking at it, and ask them more questions about that. If you see a report and this is the information that you're seeing, what kind of questions are you going to have? What kind of holes are you going to poke in that? What are you going to question about the legitimacy or the logic that we're using, so that you can then go back and refine and make sure that everything's incorporated? But in the end, when you say, okay, I think we have really solid logic, then you sit down with all those people again and say, hey, before we move into any build, this is based on all your feedback, this is where we've come to. Does everybody feel comfortable with that? And maybe show them what a sample report, fake numbers, would look like with that, and try to get some of their reactions then before you invest in everything that needs to happen after. In reality, it's still a long process, right? From getting that sign off to coming back to them with the actual reports in hand.
Well, and I will tell you that something I've found with people that I've just personally consulted with as far as attribution goes is to really coach them, if you will, to look at this with their own fresh pair of eyes. So many people go into looking when they're trying to sell up to somebody their belief system rather than letting the data drive their own discovery period. If you are the person arguing that attribution should be done this certain way and you don't have great data to support what is the larger picture story that is actual versus what you believe, a lot of times people run down the wrong belief path,
Yes.
arguing the wrong belief without letting the, again, I say in my business, being channel agnostic.
Yes.
I don't really care where the leads come from.
Right.
As long as I'm nurturing them correctly, the right way, if they come from Bing versus Google, there's nothing wrong with that. The quality of the customer is the same. A lot of that other stuff's irrelevant, and just being
Right.
pushed down a path where you think, and again, I'm not picking on Google, but where Google is the one that solved every one of my problems just by giving them more money, that has not worked for everybody either. So it's a good way to waste a lot of money quickly.
Right. And it's just about gaining the knowledge to take action on. I mean, it's all
Exactly.
about optimizing where you spend that budget. It's, as you said, I mean, a CMO shouldn't care if LinkedIn is more successful than a Google paid ad. They just want to, I mean, they shouldn't care in terms of, I wanted to invest in LinkedIn. They should invest where it's going to make the most sense.
Agreed. Well, so we've talked about automation and we've talked about attribution. The next, I think, big problem is really looking at your tech stack, which again, we've referenced this a little bit. One of the things that I mentioned Scott Brinker so much on a lot of just conversations with the Martech 5000, which is now 7,000 plus, was the last one. Who knows what it'll be. I think he's even said with all the apps and things like that that are almost companies. I mean, we're almost to the point where we're talking about an infinite number of plugins, basically.
Right.
Every WordPress plugin could be a company. I mean, when you think of all the pieces that work together, it can become a really complex thing for any marketer at any company, small or large, to implement. So how do you go about helping companies at least to start look at their tech stacks?
Yeah, I mean, an interesting thing about tech stacks is because you and I lived through this evolution where you remember back in the day when you stumbled across a solution to your problem that was technology, you were so excited. Hey, there's an answer to this problem. This piece of technology solves it. We need that piece of technology, and that's really how a lot of companies grew their tech stacks. I mean, back in 2008, 2009, there wasn't there would be no scenario where you were able to sit back and say, here are all the problems we have, and based on the technology that exists, this is what we should put together to solve those problems. That just wasn't a thing back then, but now it is, and it's constantly evolving, and there will be new solutions and more consolidated options and all of that. But now you're actually at a point where you can sit down as a marketing team and say, okay, here are all of our needs, and look at what technology is out there to solve that, and be more strategic about compiling the stack that's going to be cost efficient, that's going to be easiest to use for your team, that's going to let you grow over the next few years to meet the goals that you have in the future. And so I encourage companies, departments to do that exercise. Kind of forget about what you have in place now. Let's look higher level at your goals and what exists. And that doesn't mean you have to wipe everything that you have. That's often not what you should do anyway. Then you take into consideration what we already have. Okay, if we were going to buy fresh now, maybe I would look at this other tool. But is it really going to make a difference compared to what I've already invested in, these two tools working together? It's still cost is comparable. My team already knows how to use it, et cetera. But at least then you kind of have that map of what we need from a technology perspective or would benefit from. And what that looks like, I always encourage, not just right now in the moment, but let's look 3 years out, 5 years out, if you have that vision of what we want to grow into. And yes, there will be new technology that comes along and things will evolve, but at least you're doing a pulse check right now. And then you come back to it every 6 months or a year and say, all right, did the goals shift? Did the technology needs shift? And are we still on track in terms of what we're doing with technology?
Are you a fan of the larger ERP fixes, or a hodgepodge, if you will, of a lot of smaller technologies that fit together?
I like the hodgepodge. I don't often see, I don't know if I should say this, but I don't often see a complete tech
You're in
stack.
DC, so you got to be politically correct.
I know. It's hard to find a full tech stack offered by one company that's going to optimally meet all of a company's needs. And even if, I mean, there's a matter of just plugging in, like you said, some of those smaller technologies that meet some of the fringe needs of companies at this point.
Yeah, but the problem with, and you think about this even with Marketo would have been one of those decent sized company at the time, and then they get folded into Adobe. So, your long term view with most of these technology companies is not maybe as long as, not all of them are going to be around for 20, 30, 40 years. They want to sell to somebody bigger. And then what happens, like with a lot of technologies, is their capabilities start to slowly fade away, and they get wrapped into something else that somebody else, the bigger company that bought them, wants to push something different, maybe, or they're not as emphatic about that solution you bought them for. So part of the problem I find a lot of time with hodgepodge, and there's not a right or wrong answer. The hodgepodge, although it gives me great capabilities today, by the time I've really grown to love it, they sold off to somebody else. And it's not
Right.
like Marketo is being sold every day. It's that so many smaller companies are coming up, they sell, and then they move on.
Well, and that naturally creates the hodgepodge too,
Yeah,
right? Because
yeah.
you bought one of the smaller technologies and now it was purchased by another one of the big companies, and it's not the same as what your other technology is owned
But
by.
it's easier to administer because a lot of people like that one stop shop solution, and they can manage that. Otherwise, they've got to have somebody with in depth knowledge of 10 different technologies as opposed to one. So, one of the other issues, though, that you talked about, and I'd like you to kind of expand upon, is does your tech stack really reflect your end goals? How should somebody look at the end goals for what it is that they want to do beyond just managing the tech stack?
I mean, you can even take it back to, let's say, attribution reporting is one of your goals, right? So you need to look at, from the technology we have, do we have strong reporting capabilities? And strong is, of course, defined by the company as far as what they want to get to from an attribution reporting perspective in terms of detail and the logic that they can apply and the output of reports. Some might say my CRM produces reports and it's enough for what we need. We don't need a BI tool, right? But others might say, we want extensive reporting, highly customizable in logic and in output. And there's no way we can accomplish that without a BI tool. And if you don't have one, it now needs to be on your roadmap of technology that needs to be purchased. So it's a matter of saying, okay, from a CMO level, what do I need to be able to do in 2 years, in 3 years, in 5 years? And now, does the technology I have support me getting there? No, then does the technology exist to help me get there? Yes. Okay. Now we have a category of technology to look at. Hop over to Scott Brinker's image and look at what's in the bucket there and start vetting them and seeing the differences.
One of the things that I've also run through quite a lot in my career, and I'm curious where you kind of sit with this with a lot of the people that you consult with, is build or buy. And I think one of the problems that I find so often with MarTech stacks is it becomes a problem that a lot of companies fear they don't have the time to manage, they don't have the time to buy and become an expert in. Then it becomes to where they're servicing so much of the technology that they forget to service their end customer, whether that's B2C or B2B. So that conversation around build or buy is something that's becoming much more prevalent today than it was before, because a lot of the smaller pieces that we can fit together can assemble, again, to borrow this comparison again, a race car than it was before. I mean, I can buy half the stuff today with a credit card and be off to the races within a weekend.
Yeah.
But that also can create a massive problem. So
yeah.
How do you look at build or buy with a lot of the people that you consult with on how they look at their tech stacks?
So in general, I am a fan of buy for the following reasons. I came from a company that I worked for before that was just very scrappy and everything was build, which is how I was sent to go look for an email platform, because we were coding SQL to pull lists. We couldn't, because it broke at some point, and the person who developed it left and nobody could figure out the code to fix how to actually tell if somebody had opened or clicked through an email. This is back in the day. There are challenges like that, right, that come into play. Now, so I say buy because then the vendor that you're paying is responsible for continuously moving it forward, keeping it up to date with newest technology and features and all of that, right? There are exceptions to that. So for example, a company we were talking to very recently has very high security restrictions around kind of healthcare, but beyond HIPAA even. And so they have so much across the systems in their company. There's so much that they have to do to protect that data and be able to link it together and do all of this manipulation with it, that it's really hard to find vendors across the board of their needs that will be able to meet their security needs. So I think there are exceptions to that. It also means they have a very large, very smart IT group who is dedicated, like marketing has dedicated IT resources, sales has dedicated IT resources, and I'm not talking about one person. So in terms of, some people think, well, it'd be cheaper to build, right? But I don't think that generally is true. And so you have to look at the reason that you would be trying to build instead of buy. But with the exception of like that example and a few others, I'd say buy.
Well, your labor costs.
And think about this. Think about how, just like with an email platform, and how our email clients are just evolving, right? And so now on the iPhone, you can look at your email in dark mode. How do you adjust your emails to render properly in dark mode? Like, do you want to think about that internally, or do you want to let this other company think about that and roll out that solution to all of their customers?
Yeah, it's about 40 more internal meetings, and then you have to work with 12 different agencies to redo everything. So, all right. Well, Carly, I asked this of all my guests. What is your favorite kind of shark and why?
Oh, it's a trick question.
You're on a shark's perspective.
I mean, my thing that I know about sharks is like when we go to Cape Cod and there's always the shark app that we have to follow.
There you go. That's a fair one, a shark app in Cape Cod, because they've got some beautiful great whites up there.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Okay.
Carly, it's that special time of the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today?
Yes.
All right. Number one, marketing or technology?
Ooh, such a good question. Marketing.
Why so?
Because the technology is just a tool to get the marketing
Thank you.
done.
Yeah, because it's very rare that we ever actually talk about the quality that went into the email. Now it's
Right.
just, can I just bombard somebody at a certain time in the morning and hit them 87 more times through a drip campaign? All right. Number two, elephants or donkeys?
Oh, this is tricky. I'm going to go with the donkey.
Okay. Well, you live in DC, so it was a little bit of a subconscious question. All
Yeah.
right. Number three, DC should be a state or should not be a state?
Oh, it should be. It's not fair.
It's not fair. Okay. Well, yeah, but
People live there.
it's
They
the
should have the
size
right
of like
to
a
vote.
county. It'll make Rhode Island look big. So, so
That's fine. That's okay.
number four, the Jefferson Memorial or the Lincoln Memorial?
The Lincoln Memorial.
Why so?
I just love how he's up there
Yeah.
overlooking the
Overlooking the reflecting pools, amazing. All right, number five, and the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
cornbread.
All right, it was
I
an
love
easy.
cornbread.
Good. So, Carly, where can people find out more about you, keep up with your thoughts in technology, learn more about your company, and more?
I'm on LinkedIn, so search Carly Schrager or it's C Schrager at the end. My website is definitive-results.com. And on LinkedIn, I started a coffee series called Coffee with Carly, where we have fun guests join us, and we get to just talk about marketing as well.
Carly, again, thank you so much for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
Thank you. I loved being here. This was fun.
So there was my conversation with Carly Schrager, the CEO of Definitive Results. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with her. First, remember with automation to be careful with a tool that simply helps you optimize. For many, it's become an easier way to just throw spaghetti on the wall to see what works. I use email campaigns as an example and think of how often you get automated emails from a brand that poorly strategizes this as an actual way to pull you in closer. Then when you automate other channels as part of that strategy, well, it often pushes a lot of customers away. So really dive into that strategy. With great technology power comes great automation responsibility. Or that's what I think Peter Parker's uncle said, something like that. Second, establish your roadmap first. If you don't know truly what you want to accomplish, then you need to figure that out early, especially with automation. We often think that bigger companies have this all figured out, and they don't. One of the biggest problems I've found with working with them is that larger companies simply can't steer their own ship quickly enough to enact change needed by customers today. Remember that people and processes are much more difficult to change than the automation that we can implement with technology so quickly. But your customers can change to competitors quickly, so you have to adapt. As she sees it as well, it's often not a change in technology platforms that's needed to fix the underlying problems. So pause at least before you do. Get the most out of what you have before you find that new piece of technology that simply masks a greater underlying problem. It depends on your business, of course, but the new shiny object isn't always the fix. Third, love the conversation on attribution. It was such a problem pre-pandemic, and it's just as much after. Keep an open mind on your channels and tactics and how they all work together. Let the data drive more of a bigger picture than just a channel picture, and get the agreement from the C-suite on what works for attribution. Automation has somewhat complicated attribution, especially the weight of each channel in a pandemic, to post-pandemic world when models are somewhat broken, if not at least fractured. So part of the problem is looking at last click and things like that and thinking that's where all your success goes, and it's not that way. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. And quite simply, I will attribute much of this success to you, and I can't automate that. Join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.